I remember the sound before anything else. The phone was ringing, shrill and urgent, splitting the quiet of my tiny apartment. I had just gotten home from my shift, shoes still on, purse still hanging from my shoulder. I was tired in the way that settles behind your ribs. The night outside the window was heavy and blue, and that phone kept ringing. When I answered, the voice on the other end didn't sound casual or polite, the way hospital receptionists usually do. It sounded tight. "Miss, we need you to come back, as soon as possible." There was a pause. I felt my pulse stumble. "Did something go wrong?" I asked. "We'll explain when you arrive. It's important." I remember standing there, frozen, staring at the chipped paint on my wall. That call changed everything about my life. Everything I thought I knew about who I was. Everything I believed about fate. But maybe I should start from the beginning. My name is Anna. I was 26 when all of this happened. Not old, not young, just somewhere in between, like a book half read. I lived in a small apartment above a bakery that always smelled like warm bread, though I could rarely afford to buy any. I worked as a clerk in a little convenience store near the bus station. Nothing glamorous, just shelves, receipts, long shifts, and the familiar bell that chimed every time someone came in. My life was simple in the way quiet lives often are. I woke up early, made cheap coffee that tasted a little burnt no matter what I did, and walked to work with my hands tucked in my coat pockets. I didn't have many friends, not because I didn't want them, but because the kind of tired I lived with didn't leave much space for socializing. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't exactly full of dreams either. Life had taught me early that dreaming too big only made the fall hurt more. Still, I liked small things. The way the morning light hit the windows of passing buses, the way older couples held hands like they had no one else in the world, the way kindness, when it appeared, felt like a warm blanket. I tried to be that kind of kindness in the ways I could. That was how I ended up at the hospital that day. It was nothing dramatic. I wasn't sick. I wasn't visiting anyone. I had simply seen a sign taped crookedly in the window of a pharmacy while I was buying cheap shampoo. It said there was an urgent blood shortage at the local hospital, a rare type needed. I didn't know what my blood type was. Most people don't. But I had time that day. My shift didn't start until afternoon, and the sign felt like it was speaking to me, personally, in a whisper I couldn't quite explain. So I went. There were white hallways that smelled like antiseptic and tired nurses with soft smiles. The waiting room chairs were cold and uncomfortable. A baby cried somewhere behind a curtain. The world seemed to slow, then stretch. When they took my blood sample, the nurse looked relieved. "We could really use this," she said, and I felt something warm swell in my chest, something like purpose. They asked if I would donate right then. I agreed. I didn't realize I had been gripping the edges of my life so tightly until that moment. Doing something good felt like loosening a knot. As I lay there watching the blood flow out of me, the nurse mentioned something about an emergency case upstairs. A man who'd come in unconscious. They didn't know his name. No wallet, no ID. Just a body fighting to stay alive. He needed a transfusion immediately. I remember wondering about him, who he was, whether someone somewhere was waiting for him to come home. A nurse smiled gently when she saw the look on my face. "You may be the reason he gets another chance," she said. I didn't know why that sentence made my throat tighten. Maybe because no one had ever said something like that to me before. After the donation, I felt lightheaded. but I walked home with my coat pulled close and my steps unhurried. The city was noisy in a familiar way. Cars passing, conversations drifting, the world moving without noticing me. That night, I slept a little easier than usual. I wasn't expecting anything more from it. I wasn't expecting a thank you, or recognition, or change. To me, it was just something small and good in a world where good things sometimes felt rare. But the next day, the hospital called. They didn't sound grateful. They didn't sound calm. And they didn't even mention the man whose life I might have helped save. Instead, they asked me to come back immediately. When I asked why, their tone became even more serious. "There is something we found in your blood tests," the woman on the line said. A strange quiet stretched between us. My heart began to race. "Is it bad?" I whispered. "We'll explain when you arrive. Please, don't delay." I stood in my kitchen, still in my work shoes, feeling the air around me change. It was like the room had suddenly shrunk. My mind spiraled. Had they found something wrong with me? Some illness I didn't know I had? Had I unknowingly put someone else at risk? The idea made my stomach twist. I thought of the man in that hospital bed, the stranger who was now linked to me by blood. I didn't even know his name, but suddenly I couldn't stop thinking about him. Something had happened, something important, and I had no idea how much of my life was about to be rewritten. I didn't go to work that morning. I called my manager. Well, the manager. He liked to remind us we were all replaceable, and told him I had a medical emergency. He huffed into the phone like I'd personally inconvenienced the universe. "You know, we're short-staffed today." "I know. I'm sorry. I'll make up the hours." A long, irritated exhale. "Fine, but don't make a habit of it." He hung up before I could reply. I stood there with the silent phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the dust floating in a slanted line of morning sunlight. My life didn't have much room for emergencies. If I lost that job, there wasn't a backup plan waiting. Just bills, just rent, just the same quiet survival I lived 1 month at a time. Still, I grabbed my coat and headed to the hospital. The bus ride felt longer than usual. My heartbeat seemed too loud in my chest. Every passing streetlight and storefront blurred. I was trying to prepare myself for the worst. But how do you prepare for something when you don't even know its name? I kept imagining the nurse's voice. "We found something." The words looped like a broken record. When I reached the hospital, the automatic doors slid open with that same soft whoosh as before. But the place felt different this time. Heavier. The nurse at the front desk recognized me almost instantly. Her posture straightened. "Oh, this. One moment. Let me page the doctor." People don't page doctors for routine updates. My stomach tightened. They led me to a small, private consultation room. Too white, too quiet. I sat on a hard plastic chair and tried to keep my breathing steady. I folded my hands in my lap so no one would see them shake. After a few minutes, the door opened. A doctor walked in. Late 40s, silver streaks in her hair, tired eyes that still held softness. "Anna," she said gently, sitting down across from me. "Thank you for coming back so quickly." Her voice was calm, and that almost made it worse. "What did you find?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. She studied my face, as if deciding how much truth I could hold. "First," she said, "I want you to know that your blood donation yesterday was critical. The patient received it. You helped stabilize him." A small breath slipped out of me. "So, he's alive?" "Yes," she said, "because of you." A warmth bloomed in my chest again, but it flickered fast. In seconds, she continued, shifting. During every donation, we perform a standard screening. Your results came back showing something unusual. My fingers tightened in my lap. We found a rare genetic marker, she said. One that's associated with a very specific medical condition. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. The room narrowed. A condition? I whispered. Am I sick? She shook her head. No, you're healthy. But this marker can only occur in individuals who are related to someone with a certain hereditary disorder. It took a second for the meaning to settle. Related, I repeated slowly. Yes, she said, and the patient who received your blood yesterday has that disorder. I stared at her, not understanding. You're telling me, my voice came out thin, that the man I donated blood to is related to me? She nodded. My breath caught. How related? I whispered. She hesitated. We won't know precisely until further tests, she said carefully. But the marker strongly suggests immediate family. The words immediate family felt like they echoed inside my skull. That can't be possible, I said. There's no one. I don't have family. Not anymore. It's just me. The doctor's eyes softened. Sometimes families separate. Sometimes histories get lost. Sometimes people believe things that weren't completely true. I shook my head. No, I know where I come from. My mother, but the word stuck. Because the truth was, I didn't know as much as I thought. My mother had never spoken much about the past. My father was someone whose name I learned once and forgot just as quickly. There were no photo albums, no stories, just silence. Silence doesn't leave footprints to follow. The doctor spoke quietly. We can run confirmatory tests, and, if you're open to it, you can meet him once he regains consciousness. I didn't say anything, not because I didn't want to, but because my thoughts had splintered into 1,000 pieces. A stranger, a man whose face I had never seen, a man who was fighting for his life, and my blood, my actual blood, was now inside him. The doctor placed a gentle hand on the table. You don't have to decide anything today, but we will call you when he wakes. In the meantime, please, try to take care of yourself. I nodded, but it felt like someone else was moving my head. The walk home was different than the walk there. The city looked the same, but I didn't feel like I belonged to it anymore. The bakery smell was still warm. The buses still hissed at stops. The world kept moving, unchanged. But something in me had shifted, quietly and permanently. A stranger might be my family. A life I didn't know existed was reaching back for me, and I had no idea what I would find if I followed. Yet I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. If he was family, then why had I grown up so painfully alone? When I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed and just stared at the floor. The room was quiet, except for the ticking of the old wall clock I'd found at a thrift market years before. It was one of those clocks with a second hand that moves in small, jittery steps, like it's nervous. I watched it climb around the circles again and again. Time felt strange, like something was unraveling behind me, and I hadn't even realized it had been tightly wound in the first place. The doctor's words kept echoing in my mind. Immediate family. I said the words out loud once, just to hear how they sounded in my voice. It didn't feel real. It felt like I had stepped into someone else's life, like I was watching a story written for someone with a history, someone who belonged somewhere. But that wasn't me. I grew up believing this world had gaps, and I was one of them. I was raised by my mother, just her and me, on the edge of a quiet town where houses leaned close together, as if whispering secrets. My mother was gentle, but her silence was a wall. She worked long hours as a seamstress, and our life was practical, not emotional. We didn't talk about feelings or dreams or the past, especially not the past. When I was 9, I asked her once why we never visited family like other children did. Why there were no grandparents, no aunties, no cousins. She stopped folding the laundry and sat very still. "We have enough," she said. "Just the two of us." Her tone didn't invite more questions. So I did. When she died, suddenly, quietly, without drama, I was 16. No relatives came to the funeral. No one claimed connection. The world did not rearrange itself to take me in. So I learned to take care of myself. And now I was being told I wasn't really alone after all. That somewhere at this very moment, someone with my blood was breathing because of me. The thought was overwhelming, terrifying, a strange kind of miraculous. I realized I hadn't eaten all day. I went to the small kitchen and opened the cupboard. Half a box of tea, 2 cans of soup, a bag of rice. Enough to get by. Always enough to survive. I boiled water and tried to steady my hands as I poured it. The kettle rattled slightly against the stove. I watched the steam curl like a ghost, weightless and fading. When I sat down at the table, the tea tasted like nothing. My mind wouldn't stop circling the same lonely question. If he was family, why didn't anyone ever tell me? Was it a secret, a mistake, something shameful? Or had someone tried to erase me from a story I was born into? The idea stung, more deeply than I expected. That afternoon, I walked to work, not because I wanted to, but because routine was something solid, something I could hold on to. The bell above the door chimed as I entered. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of cardboard and instant noodles clung to the air. My coworker Dana shot me a look from behind the counter, sharp eyebrows raised. "Boss said you had a medical emergency. You okay?" She was one of those people who said everything with the same tone, dry, unimpressed, slightly amused. "I don't know yet," I said. She blinked once. "Okay, cryptic. Love it. Want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "Not now." She nodded, but there was something understanding in her eyes. Not softness exactly, but something real. The kind of understanding that doesn't pry. We worked in silence for a while, shelf restocking, checking expiration dates, ringing up customers whose faces blurred into one another. But the hospital lived in the back of my mind, breathing. I caught myself glancing at the phone every few minutes, waiting. Evening fell slow and tired. When my shift finally ended, I pulled my coat tight and stepped outside. The sky was washed in lavender gray, the city lights just starting to glow. I began walking home, but halfway there, I stopped. My footsteps had carried me to the hospital instead. I stared up at the building. It looked different at dusk, more alive somehow. Windows glowing like warm little squares, shadows moving behind curtains, lives unfolding inside. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be there without a call. Maybe I wasn't ready. But something in me, something quiet and steady, said, "Go inside." The nurse at the front desk recognized me again. "Oh, are you here to see him?" I swallowed. "Is he awake?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, he woke up a few hours ago, but he's still weak and still confused." My heart hammered. "Can I?" I stopped. "Should I?" Her expression softened. Not pity, just human kindness. I'll ask the doctor. One moment. I sat in the waiting area. The chairs were still cold, the walls still white, but now everything felt sharper, like reality was leaning forward. The doctor from earlier appeared. Her expression was thoughtful, measured. He's awake, she said, but he's disoriented. He doesn't remember what happened yet, and he doesn't know about the possible connection. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. You don't have to speak to him today, she continued. You can wait until the confirmatory tests are complete. My hands tightened around the strap of my bag. What if I don't want to wait? I said quietly. She studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. Come with me. My pulse thudded in my ears as she led me down a hallway, turn after turn, door after door. We stopped outside a room with the curtain drawn. The doctor didn't speak. She just looked at me, offering time to reconsider, but I stepped forward. With a slow breath, I pushed the curtain aside, and there he was. A man, maybe mid-30s, lean, pale, eyes half open. His hair fell across his forehead. His breathing was steady but fragile, like a candle flame fighting to stay alive. He turned his head slowly to look at me, and in that moment, something inside my chest shifted. Something familiar. Something impossible. His eyes widened, and before I could speak, before I could breathe, he whispered a word that made my heart stop. Anna? I had never seen him before in my life. I froze where I stood, the curtain still half drawn in my hand. That one word, my name, hung in the air like a fragile piece of glass. He couldn't know me. He couldn't. But he had said it softly, like remembering something from a distant dream, like my name meant something. His voice was rough, strained from too little air and too much pain. But the way he said it wasn't confusion. It was recognition. My legs felt unsteady as I stepped closer. You know me? I asked quietly. He blinked slowly, as though waking in slow motion. His eyes were a warm brown, but dulled by exhaustion. He swallowed, trying to speak again, but the effort was too much. His breath caught, and the doctor stepped forward calmly. You should rest, she said to him gently, placing a hand on the monitor beside him. You're still recovering. But he didn't look away from me. His gaze stayed locked on mine, confused and searching at the same time, like he was trying to place a memory that didn't want to come into focus. The doctor turned to me. A moment outside, please. I didn't want to leave, but I nodded. Once we stepped into the hallway, the doctor exhaled, and her calm professional manner returned, though I saw something thoughtful flicker behind her. It's possible, she said carefully, that he recognized your face, not because he knows you personally, but because traumatic medical crises can trigger hallucinations or partial memory fragments. I nodded, but the explanation didn't settle in my chest, because the way he said my name didn't sound confused. It sounded familiar. The doctor continued, It's also possible that he heard your name mentioned by staff and connected it incorrectly. I nodded again, more out of politeness than belief. And the tests? I asked. They're being processed. It will take a few days for definitive results. A few days. I didn't know how I was supposed to live a normal life while waiting for something like that. The doctor gave a small, understanding sigh. You may visit him again later, but right now, he needs to rest, and you need time to process. Process. The word felt too small for what I was trying to hold. I stepped outside into the cold evening air. A light wind picked up, carrying the sharp scent of rain. Clouds gathered overhead, heavy and slow. I wrapped my coat tighter around my shoulders, though it didn't chase away the chill. The city did not care that the ground had shifted under me. Cars still honked. Pedestrians still rushed past. Life continued. But I walked home like each step was being measured. Softly. Carefully. Like the world had turned into thin ice. Inside my apartment, I sat at the table with the lights still off. The city lights filtered through the window in soft golden patches, enough to see by. The silence wrapped around me. I put my head in my hands. Why did he know my name? Did I look like someone he once knew? Someone he once lost? Someone he once loved? Or was the truth something deeper? Something I wasn't prepared for? I tried to remember every detail about my mother. Her hands, always moving. Her eyes, always guarded. Her voice, soft, but with walls around it. Was there anything at all, that suggested a secret like this? A lie like this? The longer I thought about it, the more I realized I knew almost nothing about her life before me. She never told stories. She never shared memories. She never explained why we lived the way we did. Why we avoided questions. Why our past was a locked room with no key. And I had never asked. Not really. Not enough. Because I thought I understood the shape of my life. Because I believed that having nothing simply meant there was nothing to have. But now there was someone out there who might share my blood, my features, my history. Someone who might hold a piece of my life I didn't even know was missing. Someone who said my name like it was a memory. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while streetlights flickered like distant stars. I tried to count breaths, to calm the shaking inside my chest. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Pale, tired, alive. And I felt something I hadn't expected. A pull. Not obligation. Not guilt. Something softer. Something fragile. Something that felt frighteningly like hope. The kind of hope you don't want to look at too closely in case it disappears. Morning came quietly, a pale gray filtering through my curtains. I got up, washed my face, tied my hair back, and made coffee. The routine grounded me for a moment, but when I sat down with the mug in my hands, I didn't drink it. I just held it, warm against my palms. I whispered to the empty room. "Who are you?" The question wasn't for me. It was for him. The stranger with my blood. The man who spoke my name. The man I might be tied to by something deeper than chance. I knew then, with slow certainty, that I would go back to the hospital. Not in fear, but in search. Not of answers, but of the truth. And I wasn't sure which would be harder to face. I didn't sleep well that night after donating blood. Not because I was worried or sick or anything like that. It was more like my mind had been quietly shaken, like a snow globe after a sudden tap. All night, I kept seeing the faint image of the person I had helped, though I had never seen their face, just the idea of them. A life I didn't know, tied to mine now by a red thread of blood. It was strange, and yet somehow gentle. Life, however, doesn't pause for emotional symbolism. The alarm on my phone went off at 6:05 a.m., like always. The same quiet ringtone, the same dim light leaking through the old curtains in my small apartment, the same cracked ceiling I stared at while gathering myself enough to move. I lived alone, though sometimes I felt like the silence itself was my roommate, the kind that doesn't talk but always follows you around. I sat up slowly and rubbed my eyes. time to start another day. My life was simple, maybe too simple. I worked at a small bakery on the corner of 7th Street, the kind of place that always smelled like warm sugar and fresh bread, no matter the season. It was cozy and honest, the sort of shop where regulars come in every morning and no one needs to speak to be understood. I tied my hair back, put on my slightly faded blue apron, and walked the 15 minutes to work. The air was cool and the streetlights still hummed softly. The world always felt softer in those early hours, as if everyone's worries were still asleep. Inside the bakery, I flipped on the lights and the ovens, listening as the machinery came to life like old friends stretching after a long nap. My coworker, Mila, arrived shortly after. She was the opposite of me, bright, loud, always laughing, always confident. When she entered a room, it was like someone had opened a window and let fresh air rush in. "Morning, sleepy angel." That nickname still makes no sense, I muttered, tying my apron. "It suits you. You look like someone who pets stray cats and cries during commercials." I didn't deny it, because it was true. We worked in comfortable silence for the next hour as we arranged pastries, kneaded dough, and brewed the first pot of coffee. People began to arrive. The tired office workers, the retired neighbors, the students rushing to class. I liked the quiet understanding of serving people. There was something grounding about giving someone a warm pastry and seeing their shoulders lower just a little, like I'd made their morning 2% better. And for me, that was enough. Or at least, I told myself it was. Around midday, when the rush slowed, I stepped outside to take a breath. The sun had come out fully now, warming the street. People were walking in pairs, friends, lovers, co-workers, filling the air with pieces of conversations. I watched them with a feeling I didn't like naming. Not jealousy exactly, more like longing. I had friends, yes. I had co-workers. I had neighbors who smiled at me. But sometimes, in moments like this, I felt like I was watching life instead of living it. Like I was standing behind glass. Sometimes at night, I would imagine a warmer version of my life, one filled with laughter across a dinner table, the sound of keys jingling as someone else came home, the quiet intimacy of folding laundry together. But those thoughts never lasted long. I would push them away like someone pushing aside a dream before it becomes painful. My life was fine, steady, predictable, safe. Still, sometimes I wondered if safety was just another name for loneliness. The day after I donated blood, the hospital called me. I thought it was just a routine follow-up at first, but the voice on the phone was calm in a way that didn't feel routine at all. "Miss Danieluk? We'd like you to come back to the hospital. It's about the donation you made yesterday." There was a pause. "Everything is okay. We just want to speak to you in person." My heart didn't drop exactly, but it lifted its head, like it had heard something unusual. I said I could come tomorrow morning before work. But all day, a subtle hum of curiosity moved underneath my thoughts. Who was the person I helped? Why did they want to speak to me? And why in person? Even that evening, while washing dishes in my small kitchen, I found my mind drifting, wondering. The city outside my window glowed warm and golden, lights flickering like distant constellations. Somewhere out there, a stranger was breathing because of me. It was a simple truth, yet it felt enormous. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital at 8:14 a.m. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and the faint sweetness of hand sanitizer. The chairs were uncomfortable, and the walls were the color of overcooked oatmeal. A nurse approached me. "Miss Daniluk? Right this way." We walked down a quiet corridor. At the end of it was a door slightly ajar. The nurse paused, gave me a small encouraging smile, and motioned for me to go inside. I took a slow breath and stepped forward. And that was when I saw him. He was sitting in a chair by the window, sunlight falling across his face. His posture was straight, but his expression was tired. The kind of tired that comes from more than just lack of sleep. He looked up when I entered. His eyes were dark, deep and steady. Not dramatic, not intense, just seeing me, fully. There was a quiet gravity to him, like the world was a little slower around him. "Hello," he said softly. His voice was warm, gentle, but with a hint of something unspoken underneath. I didn't know him, but I felt something shift, like the floor beneath me had tilted just a few degrees. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "I think I'm in the wrong room." "No," he said. "You're not." The doctor by the bed cleared his throat. "This is the patient who received your blood." My heart stilled for a moment. Him. This was the life tied to mine. He stood carefully, placing one hand against the armrest for balance. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "You didn't just donate blood, you saved my life." I didn't know what to say. Words seemed too small. He smiled, just barely. "My name is Adrian." I said my name in return. He repeated it, softly, like he was tasting its shape. There was no dramatic music, no thunderous realization, just an unusual quietness. The calm that feels meaningful, without needing to explain itself. We talked for a while, slowly, like two people wading into warm water. He asked about my work. I asked how he was feeling. The conversation wasn't crowded with questions or nerves, just natural. Near the end, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I don't know why you were the one who donated that day," he said, "but I'm glad it was you." I felt something flutter. Not romantic, not dramatic, just a warmth, a closeness, a thread. As I stood to leave, he reached gently toward me, not touching me, just a small motion to hold the moment in place. "Would it be all right if we spoke again sometime?" I nodded before I could think. "Yes," I said, "I'd like that." His smile was soft, real. The sunlight fell across him again, and for a moment, I saw the world as if it had opened a door. I walked out of the hospital into the cool morning air. The city was the same. The streets, the cars, the people. But inside me, something was different. I could feel it. A quiet beginning, unfolding like the first petal of a flower. And as I walked back toward the bakery, I caught myself smiling, small, private, and full of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Hope. I didn't know it yet, but that simple yes would change everything. I didn't see Adrian again for 4 days. Life kept moving like it always does. Customers coming in and out of the bakery, dough rising in warm bowls, the bell over the door chiming softly every time someone entered. But something inside me had shifted. A quiet awareness, a softness, like a candle had been lit somewhere deep. And the flame made everything feel a little warmer. I tried not to think about him too much. I tried to stay grounded. I didn't know him. I didn't know his story. And people like that, people you meet in rare, extraordinary circumstances, they usually drift back out of your life, just as quietly as they appear. I told myself not to make it anything. But every time the bell on the bakery door rang, my heart flickered. Mila noticed, of course. Mila notices everything. "You're glowing," she said one morning as we arranged pastries in the display case. I really don't think that's true. It absolutely is. You look like someone who has a... I didn't respond. She leaned closer. Is it a man's secret? My hands froze mid-air. Mila grinned like she'd just found buried treasure. Oh ho ho, so there is someone. I finally spoke. It's not like that. It's nothing. Mila arched a brow, slow and dramatic. If it was nothing, you'd be talking normally. I hated how well she knew me. It was early evening when my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. Unknown number. My heart did that strange flutter it had started learning recently. I wiped my flour-covered hands on a towel before picking up my phone. Adrian, I hope this is still your number. The nurse said I could reach you here. I wanted to ask how you've been. I stared at his message longer than necessary. My fingers hovered. I didn't want to sound too excited, or too distant, or too anything. I typed, me. I'm doing okay, just working a lot. How are you? He responded quickly, as if he'd been waiting. Adrian, I'm recovering, walking more, breathing easier. I've been thinking about our conversation. If you're free sometime, I'd like to see you again. I read that line 3 times. The bakery felt suddenly warmer, full of something light and invisible. My reply came almost without thought. Me. Yes, I'd like that too. We agreed to meet at a small park near the city center. Quiet, tree-lined, with benches that overlooked a pond where ducks drifted like slow-moving clouds. It wasn't a date. At least, I didn't think it was. I arrived early, mostly because I was afraid of being late. The air smelled like damp leaves and coffee from the nearby cafe. Children were playing somewhere in the distance. A dog barked once, sharp but playful. I sat on a bench and tried to keep my breathing even. Then I saw him. He walked slowly, carefully, still recovering, but his steps were steadier than the day in the hospital. He wore a simple dark coat, hands tucked in the pockets. When he saw me, his expression changed in a very small, very real way. His shoulders relaxed, like seeing me made something ease inside him. Hi, he said as he reached me. There was no grand moment, no dramatic music, just a gentle warmth settling between us. Hi, I replied. We walked along the path, the leaves crunching softly under our feet. There was no rush in our conversation. Every topic unfolded slowly, like a flower opening to the sun. He told me he was still recovering from a sudden internal bleed, something rare, something that could have ended differently if the timing had been even slightly off. And I told him about the bakery, how I loved the mornings most, when the world felt quiet and new. He listened to me the way people rarely do, not waiting for his turn to speak, just listening. At one point, we stopped by the water. Ducks drifted lazily, like they had all the time in the world. He looked at the pond, but his voice was thoughtful. I've been thinking a lot about timing, he said. How life turns on the smallest things. 1 minute, I didn't know you existed. The next, your blood is keeping me alive. I didn't know how to answer that. So I said the truth. I'm glad you're here. He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment, the world felt very still. We sat on the bench, our shoulders not touching, but close enough that I could feel his warmth, like sunlight sitting near the skin. We didn't talk about big dreams or dramatic emotions. We talked about small things. How he likes black coffee, but only in the evenings. How I always burn the first batch of cookies, no matter how hard I try. How he enjoys listening to thunderstorms. How I used to fall asleep as a child, listening to my father's radio. Ordinary things, but the ordinary felt sacred, a kind of soft unfolding. At one point, a breeze lifted a strand of hair into my face. I reached to tuck it behind my ear, but he moved first. His fingers didn't touch me, but they hovered, just for a moment, close enough to feel the warmth of him. Close enough to know I wanted that closeness more than I expected. We both froze. Just a quiet second. A breath. A beginning. As the sun began to set, the sky turned the color of peach tea and fading embers. We walked back toward the street. Near the corner, he paused, as if he wanted to say something more. Something meaningful, but didn't yet have the words for it. So instead, he simply said, "Can I see you again?" And I didn't even have to think. Yes, my voice was quiet. But sure, very sure. And as we parted, I realized something with a soft, trembling clarity. I was not watching life from behind glass anymore. I was stepping into it. After that day in the park, something settled into my life like a new rhythm. Not loud or dramatic, just steady, gentle, a warmth that followed me everywhere. I woke up thinking about our conversations. I went to sleep wondering what he was doing. I caught myself smiling at nothing, at the memory of his voice, at the way he listened, at how he never rushed his words. Mila teased me constantly, of course. "You're in the pre-love stage," she said, pointing a dough-covered spoon at me. "The floating stage, the world shimmers like sparkling water stage." I tried to roll my eyes, but she wasn't wrong. It did feel like that. The days felt brighter, softer. Even the cold January air felt less sharp. But with that softness came something else too, a quiet, nervous flutter, like my heart was learning how to beat differently. Because when something begins to matter, you start to fear losing it. We met again 2 days later. Same park, same time, but something was different this time. Less cautious, more familiar. He walked toward me more confidently than before, though I could still tell he was recovering. His coat was buttoned, his steps slow but deliberate. When he reached me, there was no hesitation in his smile. I realized then how rare his smile was. Not the polite kind, the real one. The one that softened the edges of his eyes. "Hi," he said. I felt my heart warm. "Hi." This time, we didn't walk. We sat on the bench beside the pond, close enough that our shoulders brushed lightly when one of us shifted. He had brought 2 coffees, mine with cream and 1 sugar. I blinked. "I didn't tell you how I take it." He looked almost shy. I remembered from the hospital cafeteria. "You added 1 sugar then." But small details are how people say, "I care," without using those words. We drank our coffees, sharing comfortable silence. Leaves drifted on the pond. A child laughed somewhere behind us. The world felt unhurried. "I wanted to tell you something," he said finally. I turned toward him. He exhaled slowly, gathering the right words. When I woke up after my transfusion, I didn't feel grateful. I felt ashamed. I frowned softly. Ashamed? Why? Because my life only continued because someone else gave something of themselves. And I didn't feel like I'd done enough with my life to deserve that gift. His gaze dropped to his hands. fingers tracing the coffee cup lid. I watched him, not the dramatic version of him, not the moment in a hospital bed version, just him, a quiet man learning how to hold his own survival. "You don't owe your life to anyone," I said gently. "You deserved to be saved. Everyone does." He didn't respond right away, but something eased in his shoulders. Then he smiled, a small, real, softened thing. "I'm glad you were the one who saved me," he said. And something inside me shifted. Not fell, not collapsed, just shifted, like the floor beneath me had opened into something much deeper. A breeze moved through the trees, and he zipped his coat a little higher. The sky was fading into pale pink and violet. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Anything. What were you doing that day? Before the hospital, I mean." His expression changed, not dramatically, just slightly, like a curtain had pulled back a fraction and then stopped. "I was coming from a meeting," he said. "It was a bad day, stress, overworking myself. I didn't listen to the signs. There was something guarded there, not a lie, but not the whole truth either." He noticed my silence. "I'll tell you everything," he added. "Just not yet. I want to be past this before I explain the rest." I nodded. I understood. We all have chapters that need time to be spoken aloud. Still, a small seed of curiosity took root inside me. As we walked back toward the street, the evening lights flickered on, warm yellow glows lining the pathway. Cars hummed softly. Someone nearby was playing a guitar, the melody slow and bittersweet. We stopped at the same corner where we had parted before. This time, we didn't step away immediately. We just lingered. He looked at me. I looked at him, and something stretched between us, invisible, warm, electric in its quietness. He lifted his hand, slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. His fingers brushed mine, just the lightest touch, but it felt like a spark rolled up my arm. A breath caught in my chest. His hand didn't take mine. It only found mine, testing, asking, waiting. I didn't pull away, not for a moment. But then he lowered his hand, not because he didn't want to hold me, but because he was still healing, still rebuilding his strength, inside and out. "Soon," he said softly. The words seemed to float in the air between us. I felt it settle into me. Soon. Not now, but soon. We parted, and my steps home felt lighter, but also more uncertain. Because the closer something becomes, the more fragile it feels. 2 days later, the hospital called again. Same number, same recorded tone, same words. "This is the Regional Medical Center calling for Miss Elena Carter. We have received some follow-up testing results, and we need you to come in when possible." My heart sank. I didn't know why. I had no reason to be afraid, but fear doesn't ask for reasons. I called back, scheduled the appointment, tried to keep my voice steady. When I hung up, I just stood there in the bakery kitchen, my hands resting on the counter, dough rising in the bowl beside me. Mila noticed instantly. "What's wrong?" she asked. "The hospital wants me to come in," I said. Her face changed, just slightly. "Do you think it's about him?" I don't know, but I did know. Somewhere deep, something was shifting again. Something was waking. The hospital lobby felt different this time. The first time I had been here, I was rushing, breathless, guided by instinct more than thought. The second time, I was simply curious, touched by what had come from my small act. But now, I walked in with a quiet dread curling beneath my ribs. The air smelled like antiseptic, coffee, and something metallic buried deep in the walls. People moved in slow patterns. Nurses clipped across the floor. A doctor stood at the reception desk, speaking softly to someone whose shoulders were shaking. Hospitals never stop holding both beginnings and endings. The receptionist recognized me. "Elena, right? You can go up. Dr. Simmons will see you." Her tone was gentler than last time. Too gentle. I nodded and made my way toward the elevator. My steps far too loud on the polished floor. Dr. Simmons greeted me with a kind smile. He was the type of doctor who spoke slowly, never rushing, as though the body could be mended more easily when words were not sharp. "Elena," he said, motioning for me to sit. "Thank you for coming in." His hands rested in front of him, fingers interlaced. I braced myself. "I want to start by saying you did a very generous thing. Not everyone steps forward the way you did. What you did saved a life." My heart should have lifted at those words, but instead it tightened. "There were routine tests done on your blood," he continued. "Just standard, required ones. And something came back that we need to discuss." The room felt suddenly small. I swallowed. "What came back?" "You have a rare genetic marker," he said gently. "Something we usually only discover by chance." I blinked. "Is it dangerous?" "Not necessarily dangerous," he said, "but significant and life-impacting." He paused, too long. My pulse beat in the hollow of my throat. "This marker is typically seen in people who are biologically related," he continued. "First-degree relation in most cases." His words hit me like a sudden drop in temperature. I stared at him, not understanding. Not at first. And then his breathing, his recovery, his blood compatibility, his quietness when I asked about his past. The way he looked at me that first day, like he saw something familiar. My voice came out thin. "You mean me and—" He didn't finish for me. He let the meaning land on its own. "Yes," he said quietly. "You and Adrian share a close genetic connection." My ears rang. "I don't understand," I whispered. We only met in the hospital. I don't know him. I've never met him before in my life." The doctor nodded, calm, steady. "Which suggests the connection is deeper. Perhaps something from your early childhood. A family separation, an adoption, a break in the record somewhere." My childhood came back to me in fragments. A mother who always avoided talking about the past. A father whose name I never knew. A silence around my earliest years that I had learned not to question. My hands were cold. "So what are you saying?" I whispered. "What does this mean?" He spoke with a softness that made the words heavier. "It means that you and Adrian may be siblings." The world blurred. The walls dissolved. The air thickened. The floor didn't feel solid anymore. I heard myself say, "No, no, that's not, I didn't. We. I stood up, not by choice, but because my body needed movement. Something to stop the rising panic. "Is it certain?" I asked. "Not yet," he replied. "This was a preliminary genetic flag. To be sure, you'll both need to do a full kinship DNA panel. If you'd like, we can arrange that." My breath came uneven. I felt like I had stepped into someone else's story. Not mine, not the one I understood. But the doctor's next words were the ones that broke something loose inside me. "I'm very sorry," he said. "This is difficult news to receive." Difficult. The understatement felt cruel, even though his voice was kind. I don't remember leaving the hospital. I don't remember crossing the parking lot. I don't remember unlocking my apartment door. What I do remember is sitting on the floor, knees drawn to my chest, the late afternoon light falling across the living room like gold spilled somewhere it didn't belong. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. I didn't cry. Not yet. Shock is dry. Shock is silent. Shock is the stillness before the wave hits. I thought of his smile, the warmth in his voice, the gentle brush of his fingers against mine, the promise of soon. Something inside me cracked, not just from fear, but from the echo of something even worse. If this was true, then everything that had begun between us wasn't just wrong. It was impossible. He texted me that evening. "Are you free tomorrow? I'd like to see you. I have something I want to tell you." I stared at the screen. My chest tightened. Something he wanted to tell me. Something I now knew, but didn't understand. For the first time since I met him, I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know who he truly was, or who I was to him. I typed nothing. The message sat unanswered. The night settled around me like a heavy blanket. And there, in the quiet, I realized this wasn't the climax. This was the beginning of the unraveling. Everything I thought I understood was about to break open, and there was no turning back now. After the hospital call, everything between Adrian and me shifted. Not dramatically, not with an argument or a confrontation. At first, it was almost imperceptible, like a faint tremor beneath the ground that you only notice when the earth moves again. He started answering my calls later than usual. Texts that once came like clockwork now arrived hours later, sometimes not at all. When we met, even for a brief walk or coffee, his attention was split. He'd laugh softly, glance at his phone, frown, then glance at me again with a fleeting warmth that never lasted as long as it used to. I tried to rationalize it. He was recovering. Maybe the blood transfusion had drained him more than he admitted. Maybe he was adjusting to life after near death. But a small knot of unease had begun to grow in my chest, tight and stubborn. It started with the little things. One evening, he was supposed to meet me at the bakery after work. I arrived, apron still tied, flour dusting my sleeves, the smell of fresh bread in my hair. The bell over the door jingled with a familiar lilt, but he wasn't there. My phone buzzed, a message from him. Something came up. "Sorry, I'll call later." Later became hours, then a day. My heart sank in a way I hadn't expected. Then came the other small inconsistencies. He spoke vaguely about his apartment, never letting me see it. He mentioned family, but only in passing, always with an abrupt shift of subject. Sometimes I noticed his fingers tremble when he held his coffee. A small, anxious quiver he seemed desperate to hide. I told myself not to overthink. Love wasn't about perfection. But deep down, I knew this unease was more than mere hesitation. It was late Saturday when I found the first undeniable clue. Adrian had invited me to his office under the pretense of discussing a medical follow-up. I arrived at a sleek building downtown, nerves humming quietly beneath my skin. I followed him up to the 5th floor, the corridors eerily silent. He was typing something on his computer when I entered. Papers scattered, soft clacking of the keyboard punctuating the quiet. And then I saw it. A folder, slightly ajar on his desk, with my name printed across the front in neat, clinical letters. I shouldn't have looked, I knew that. But curiosity, tinged with dread, propelled me forward. Inside the folder was a series of medical documents, test results, blood reports, and then a line that made the air around me freeze. Patient, biologically related, first-degree relative, confirmed via genetic marker analysis. My hands shook. I read it again, and again. It wasn't a mistake, not a clerical error. I and Adrian, we were siblings. The room felt impossibly small. The light overhead turned harsh, fluorescent, clinical. I stumbled backward, gripping the edge of his desk. Adrian. My voice was barely audible. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw him falter. That calm, composed exterior cracked, just slightly, revealing the fear he had been trying to hide. I couldn't stop myself. I needed answers. Why didn't you tell me? My voice wobbled between accusation and despair. Why didn't you say anything? He rose slowly, hands raised in a gesture meant to soothe. I didn't know how, he said. I was going to tell you. I promise. I just needed time. I needed the right words. The right words? I laughed bitterly, a short, harsh sound. Do you know what it feels like to realize that the person you were starting to care for could never be that person? His face fell. His lips parted, but no words came. I paced the office, my chest tight, tears burning behind my eyes. I felt dizzy, like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. My fingers clawed at my hair. I trusted you, I whispered. I opened my life. I let myself hope, and it's all a lie. Or maybe it's not a lie. Maybe it's worse than that. Maybe it's a truth I can't survive. He stepped toward me, cautiously. Elena, I never meant to hurt you, but I couldn't stop. I wasn't capable of being gentle anymore. You didn't just hurt me. You're my brother. My blood is yours. My heart thought it was something else, and now it's broken. I can't. I couldn't finish the sentence. The words lodged in my throat. I left his office without another word. The streets were cold that evening, winter air slicing against my cheeks. I walked with my coat wrapped tightly around me, the city lights shimmering on wet pavement like fragments of broken glass. Every sound, car tires, distant voices, footsteps echoing, felt amplified and strange, as if I were hearing the world through a distorted lens. By the time I reached my apartment, my legs felt like lead. I slid down against the door, forehead pressed to the cool wood. Tears streamed freely now, unbidden, unrestrained. I thought of our walks in the park, the small laughs, the warmth of his hand near mine. Every memory now carried a sting of betrayal, not because he had lied intentionally, but because life had arranged itself cruelly. The bread in my bakery, the golden sunlight, even the smell of freshly baked cookies. Everything felt foreign, almost surreal. I had been living a life that was mine, familiar, and suddenly it was tainted with impossibility. I sat on the floor for hours, the quiet of the apartment stretching around me like a vacuum. My body shook with sobs, my thoughts spiraling. I thought I understood love. I thought I understood hope. I thought I understood fate. I was wrong. Somewhere between tears and the fading evening light, I felt a small flicker. It wasn't warmth, not yet. It wasn't peace, not yet. It was simply recognition. I had survived loss before. I had endured loneliness before. I had lived in quiet despair before. And somehow I would endure this too. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. I didn't know if I would ever feel safe loving again. But for the first time that night, I realized one small truth. I still had myself, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start again. The days after everything fell apart were quiet in a way that felt almost unnatural. I didn't speak much. The bakery continued its rhythm, the hum of the ovens, and the scent of fresh bread filling the empty spaces in my apartment. but I moved through it like a ghost. Every step felt heavy, measured. Every glance in the mirror reflected someone I didn't quite recognize. I spent mornings staring out of the kitchen window, watching the world carry on without me. Cars hummed past, children's laughter echoed faintly from the park, and leaves tumbled across the streets like confetti of some life I wasn't part of. The apartment was full of reminders: crumbs on the counter, coffee mugs on the table, the old photo of my childhood with my mother and a father I never knew. They were all ordinary objects, and yet in that stillness, they seemed to carry the weight of what had been lost. For the first few days, I didn't even bother turning on the lights. The apartment felt softer in the muted gray of winter. I would sit on the floor, knees drawn to my chest, staring at nothing in particular. My thoughts were noisy, jumbled, full of questions that had no answers. I replayed everything: our walks, his gentle smile, the warmth of his hand brushing mine. And then the hospital documents, the truth that had arrived like a lightning strike, severing the fragile beginnings of what I thought could have been love. I didn't hate him. How could I? He hadn't lied. He hadn't chosen this any more than I had. But the ache remained, not for him, not exactly, but for the life I had imagined. It took time, but slowly, I began to sift through the rubble of my heart. I realized that love isn't always about the fairy tale we hope for. Sometimes it's about the courage to feel, even when the world twists its course unexpectedly. I thought about trust, how I had given it freely without knowing the outcome. I thought about hope, how fragile and fleeting it could be. And I thought about myself, how resilient I was, even when life handed me a blow that could have shattered me entirely. I remembered the reason I had given blood that day, not for recognition, not for reward, but because it was the right thing to do. And in that act of giving, I saw the truest reflection of who I was. I could survive heartbreak because my life was built on quiet, steadfast generosity, not on the illusions of romance. I realized then that love isn't just about who enters your life. It's about how you show up in your own. Gradually, the world outside became lighter. One morning, I made coffee and opened the window. The air smelled of damp earth and promise. Sunlight spilled across my kitchen counter, scattering shadows into something soft and warm. I breathed it in and realized I could still feel joy, small, imperfect, and entirely mine. I started walking again, letting my feet take me through streets I hadn't noticed before. I smiled at strangers, lingered to watch children play, and let myself linger in moments that didn't belong to anyone else. Back at the bakery, I threw myself into the work I loved, kneading dough, shaping pastries, watching the ovens turn raw ingredients into something nourishing. It grounded me. It reminded me that life could be rebuilt, piece by piece, even when the map I had been following had been ripped apart. One evening, a neighbor waved from across the street, and I waved back with a small, genuine smile. A little warmth spread through me, and I realized I hadn't smiled like that in days, perhaps weeks, perhaps months. It didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like a return. I came to understand something quietly profound. The people who enter our lives, even those who leave or shatter our illusions, teach us something irreplaceable. Sometimes it's about love. Sometimes it's about strength. Sometimes it's about forgiveness for others, and most importantly, for ourselves. I learned that life doesn't always unfold the way we imagine, but the act of living, of breathing, of choosing kindness and courage each day is its own quiet triumph. I learned that heartbreak doesn't erase who we are. It refines us, shapes us, reveals our capacity to rise even from the deepest of shadows. And I learned that my life is my own, that I am enough, that I can love myself fully, even if love in another form, the kind I had imagined, must remain a memory. One evening, I walked back to the park where I had first met Adrian. The pond was still, reflecting the last light of the sun in amber and gold. Ducks drifted lazily across the water. I sat on the same bench we had shared, letting the world move around me. I felt no longing for what could have been, only a quiet gratitude for what had been. The moments of warmth, the laughter, the gentle unfolding of connection, even if it was fleeting. I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and let the silence embrace me. I didn't know what the future held. Perhaps I would see him again, perhaps not. But I knew this. I had survived, I had grown, and I had chosen myself. And that, I realized, was everything.